Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Listen In podcast. It is 2021 and we are really excited to be back, and it is season 2. We've got a lot in store for everyone. My name's Arabana.
My name is Anya.
And my name is Boomy.
Let's get into it.
So we are back. It is 2021. It's a new year. Wanted to have just a quick chat today. But I think what we wanted to start with is a huge thanks to everyone who connected with us last season, who listened to the podcast, who sent us direct messages. We're really grateful for the feedback that we got, and we really enjoyed interacting with everyone, and it was such a huge surprise, so thank you.
Yeah, it's been really good just looking at everyone's messages, hearing the feedback from everyone, and being able to form new friendships and relationships with people as well. So thanks again for your support. It's been really good.
Yes, I definitely agree with you both. So the impact has been far reaching than we ever anticipated. And it just, I feel like for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned from doing this, that actually it's better to do it afraid than to not do it at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. So thank you so much, everyone, for your support, for going on this journey with us. And yes, we're really grateful.
So how was it? So I know that you said, for me, it's better to do this afraid. Was that how you was feeling at the beginning?
Yes. How I was feeling probably like through much of season 1. I mean, it was nice to have the feedback, but when you because I can be quite analytical about certain things, so I think about every possible outcome, and sometimes I then focus on the negatives to the point that it becomes detrimental. So like for me, especially I was like, if I was doing it alone, I don't think I ever would have. So it's been amazing to have the support of you both and doing this with you.
Really
likewise important.
What about you, Arabana? How did you feel throughout season 1?
I think whenever we were recording or talking about things, it was like fine. It's more when you sort of release it and people are actually listening to what you're saying. People I know would contact me and be like, oh, I listened to it and I thought this, made me realize that actually there's more of a reach. And also I think it's just surprising that so many people have experienced similar things in different ways. The thing it's taught me is I think that it's good to just do stuff sometimes. I think that sometimes when you get into a profession and you have professional training, because of the way that you're trained, you get into this pattern of making sure that all your ducks are in line, or whatever the saying is, before you do something. But sometimes you just have to do it. It actually doesn't necessarily matter, for lack of a better word. Sometimes it's good to just improvise and just try. Okay, you don't know how to do this, but just give it a go. It might actually turn out a lot better and a lot more authentic and meaningful than if you had sat down and done a deep plan. I'm not trying to say don't plan and stuff like that, but it's just taught me that sometimes it's just good, even if you don't have everything that you need, just try it. If that opportunity comes, if that time comes, just do it, and other things will come. You'll learn as you go along.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Arabana. And what this experience has taught me as well is the importance of just taking that first step and just trying. And by that, I'm not saying just go into it and blindly. I mean, we all, when we first set this up, we spent a lot of weeks, a lot of months actually.
We did.
Really planning this and trying to learn as much as we could really about podcasts and things like that. But we weren't the finished product at the same time, and we just had to,
we weren't the finished product.
Keep going with it. So I think it's I think that was definitely a learning point for me as well. I think as well for me, I found it quite challenging just being so open about
Mm.
my thoughts, about my opinions, about my experiences. I'm the type of person who is really open with my friends. We've just got, and my family, we've got that open relationship. But I'm the type of person, I come to work and I wear a mask, if I'm honest with you guys. I just wear a mask because I'm in professional mode. I can have small talk, I can have a laugh in the staff room. But then I just go back to my, I go back to work mode, and I'm there to work and be professional and just get through. But what this experience has done, it's married the two. So it's married my personality as well as my work life. And that, I'm not going to lie, that wasn't always comfortable for me, because, I'm putting out personal things on a very public platform, and then coming to work with some people who have listened to the podcast. And then, feeling like, oh, I've actually opened up this side of me. So that was a bit scary. But actually, I think from doing that, I feel a lot more confident at work. I really do feel a lot more confident, and I feel like I can be more myself at work, because I've been, I don't know, because who I am is out there now. I feel like I don't need to hide it anymore. But of course, I'm still professional, but at the same time, it's not professionalism which is, completely covering up my personality. It's kind of, both are starting to come together a lot more.
That's really good to hear. And I think that that thing about it, like being, I feel like you were I can't get my words out, like you were open in a forum, in a group that you could be open in, even though we put it out to the world, like literally we're talking to each other. That's true. Which allowed us to talk through some ideas, issues, whatever, which then seemed to boost your like your confidence, especially with the feedback and stuff. So I think that's a really important thing to kind of reflect on and acknowledge, because not everybody's going to have a podcast or a blog or whatever else, but I think just actually having people to talk to that you can talk to openly and just say how you feel, maybe that's like one of the most important things as well, so that you can get what your thoughts out and start to be more yourself and more authentic wherever you go. That's really cool.
I think it was really good to hear your like reflection on that, Anya, in terms of how you feel like this has made you feel a lot more like you can be a bit more of yourself at work. So having that balance. I feel like I think sometimes when we keep things to ourselves, there is a weight, and you just walk around with a weight on your shoulder, because it just feels like things are very on the inside of you. Whereas I think sharing it, they say that a problem shared is a problem half solved. And I think the same can be like in terms of like just being a bit more open with probably your challenges as well as your victories, which I find that sometimes, especially in this picture perfect generation, tends to like show a lot of our victories, but very, very little about our challenges. And I think it's just that for me, it's just finding that balance to actually know, okay, yes, I'm going to put myself out there a bit more, but you also benefit a lot more from that. The weight of, I think when you strive for perfection, there's a weight on your shoulder. But then once you start to share a bit more about yourself with people, especially challenges, it just starts to fall off a bit more, because then people can really see you for who you really are. And that's not a bad thing. That's definitely not a bad thing.
I think that's really interesting, because I was telling you guys about that quote that I saw online that said, don't be afraid to be seen trying. And I think that everything we're talking about links into that sort of quote, where like I think that there's obviously last season we went through lots of different reasons why you would end up, putting on a mask or whatever you want to call it, behaving in a certain way that keeps you safe so that you can keep your job basically, and other things. But I think that, like, from our experience from starting this podcast has also shown that there is something really important about just trying something and being a bit more open about what you're doing. And sometimes that leads to a lot more things than you would imagine. Like, you know, I'm sure that you never thought that being a bit more open would lead to a bit more confidence, or being a bit more open would lead to a particular relationship with somebody, or, you know, stuff like that. But it actually has done that. And I think it does encourage you to be a bit more open. So, like, I've started my own little, well, I had a page already, but obviously, you know that I'm doing my master's at the moment. So I've got a little page just on Instagram, just like putting a few things about just my life during the master's. I haven't done very much, to be honest, because other things have happened. But I don't think I would have done that if it wasn't for this kind of experience, and just seeing, you know, that it is helpful to others for them to see part of your process, even if I'm not going to show you the whole process, because, you know, but it is helpful for people to see some parts of it, or to hear some parts of your story. So yeah, I really like that quote, don't be afraid to be seen trying.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what you said is quite good, because I think it is important for people to see part of the process. You know, life is such that we don't just go through good times and high times. We do go through low points as well, and really difficult periods of life. And I think sometimes, you know, even last season where I shared about, you know, my experience in my first job in speech therapy, I had so many people coming up to me, like friends that didn't even know about the situation, even friends who did know, you know, come to me and say, wow, like just hearing it again made me really, you know, really realize like the weight of it. But, you know, people have found it encouraging as well. And I think everyone's got a story, really. Everyone's got things that they could share. And I think when we touched on it as well, often we do just see the highlights. And what I wanted to ask you guys is, why do you think that is? Why do you think a lot of what people project are the highlights? Why do you think it's so hard to show some of these vulnerable moments?
I think just based on my experience, as well as probably other people I've had conversations with, I feel like it could be a host of things. Like we've already established, there are things that kind of like external, so probably based on things that people have done to you previously, you're like, I'm going to keep it to myself. I don't want you to know that about me. But there might also be internal factors in terms of how you think people might respond if you put that information out there, which may not necessarily be correct. But I think also, I think it's really tricky, especially in this picture perfect generation. It's kind of like you I don't know, if it feels like you just have to do, and sometimes it's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses, isn't it? It's like, oh, that's what's in, so that's what we're going to talk about, rather than actually I'm going to do something different. I'm going to let people see me trying, if that makes sense. So I think there's many different reasons why. Personality, culture, and I think culture can play a big one in this. Even religious beliefs and other types of beliefs, whatever it may be, all of that plays a role in how people put themselves out there or respond to that sort of situation.
And I think, like, the culture aspect as well, I think sometimes there's so many things that you do that you don't, it's kind of subconscious, it's in your subconscious. You don't really realize that it's cultural until you start to really think about it. But sometimes, like, there is a culture of not necessarily telling people your business, keeping your business to a certain group, and not sharing things until it's, you know, 100, or until it's, you know, ticked off. Then you can say, I'm doing this, or I've done this.
Definitely.
Whilst you're in the process, I think for some of us in our cultures, it's not necessarily a set rule, but it's just a common occurrence that people won't necessarily share things in the way that it is shared in sort of Western cultures, or the culture here. So like even little things like the weekend, I had this conversation with my friend ages ago, and we were talking about, like, when you go to work and people are like, how's your weekend? And it's really funny because she's also she's a friend from Ghana as well, but we're from different ethnic groups or whatever. And she was like, yeah, I just think my weekend was fine. That's it. I don't go into the ins and outs. And I was like, yeah, I do that as well. I can't tell you why, but it's just the first thing is like, yeah, fine. And also because of all the other things that we've talked about, like putting those aside. But there is this, when you're closer to people, at least in our, and I'm not saying it's a Ghanaian thing, I hope people don't misunderstand me, but in a certain culture or way of being that I've grown up in the sort of relationships that I've had here, we just tend not to necessarily just share stuff what feels like willy-nilly, like especially your private, you don't just say stuff, but then obviously like that would come across a different way. It would feel, for other people who aren't part of that culture necessarily or don't know anything about it, it'll feel like, oh, she's really close and she doesn't really get involved in conversations. But it's like, actually no, that's just how I am, and that's how I found out actually that quite a few of us are like that, just because we just don't necessarily chat our business like that,
But why? Is it because of the fear that if you tell people something will go wrong? Is it because of our parents and their parents and their parents? Is it their personal experiences which just trickled down through the generations and said that, okay, when I told this person about this, then this awful situation happened to me, or I was then placed into this box, or I wasn't given this opportunity because I was too open about this? Or have you seen other people where they have been open and it hasn't been positive? I'm just trying to figure out a bit more about what the reason is behind it, because I think a lot of people listening might be thinking the same thing.
It's really hard to pinpoint. I think there's so many different reasons, right? There's all of the reasons of, I don't want to repeat myself, but obviously we've talked about these things before, of having to fit a certain box in the world of work to progress. There's all of those things, but even without those things, there's just and I know I keep on saying cultural, and it feels like it's not the right word necessarily, but there's just this I guess culture of not necessarily telling everyone everything, like I was born in this country, I've grown up in this country, but I still get taken aback at the level of detail that people will tell me, colleagues or whatever, they'll tell not just me but like everyone, like they might be going through something quite, what we consider quite personal. And they're not necessarily afraid to share it in the office, like everyone knows they're going through this, or whereas for me and a lot of people that I know from my culture, there's no way,
not a chance,
there's no way that we'll just saying that to my colleague, like my friend, yes, maybe I'm joking, but my friend, but like not just everybody, not just everybody. I can't say why. It is what it is.
And that's interesting. And I think for me, if I think about, maybe culturally for me, what I've kind of heard in terms of telling people your business, it's kind of around, not everyone's got the best intentions for you. So if you share this information, the people receiving it don't always have the best intentions, and it could not be a positive result at the end of
Yeah.
it. So that's something I've heard. I can't even think who I've heard it from, but I've just heard it growing up from different people, different sources. So I think that could be a major factor.
I
And
definitely, sorry, go on.
yeah, so sorry, no, you go by me.
I was just going to say, I definitely agree with you both in the sense that it doesn't feel like there's just one size fits all, like fits all to this thing. There might be different reasons why different people do it. Sometimes there might be a host of reasons why one person does it. So for someone, I met someone recently who was talking about how they shared an idea with someone, and this person was like, oh yeah, that's great, we can even partner on it together. And in the end, they just went and executed that business themselves. So obviously that sort of person, again, I don't know the details, but that sort of person will definitely probably be a bit more guarded based on that first-hand experience. Whereas for someone else, it could be a mix of culture. It could be a mix of someone else's experience passed down to them, that they just feel like, well, it's better to be safe than sorry. And again, like I said before, again, religious beliefs, because, well, if I think about my culture, there are lots of people who have certain religious beliefs, and it's just or spiritual beliefs anyway, which can be quite different from the culture here.
Yeah,
So
or superstitions as well.
Yeah, and hugely superstitions as well. So it's all of that. Yeah, so there are lots of really good examples one can think about, and I think that kind of makes you also think about how, if I didn't tell someone from this culture something about myself, and they probably assumed we were friends, or at least acquaintances, in the sense that we have a bit more of a comfortable rapport, and I just didn't feel comfortable telling them because I thought it was personal, they might be a bit offended that I didn't, because they'll think, oh, well, I thought you were okay with me. I thought we could have this conversation. Whereas if that happened with someone who was from a similar culture to me, I might be a bit more forgiving because I see it all the time. I might just think, well, they didn't share that. That's probably why. Like, I wouldn't necessarily take it to heart. Not to say that I wouldn't, but I wouldn't necessarily be offended, and I don't think they would necessarily be offended that I didn't share certain things with them as well. So it's about thinking about what's culturally acceptable as well, or what's become a norm, if that makes sense. And that differs from place to place. That's why when sometimes you're in the workplace as someone of BAME origin, especially from someone with West African background, and like it might come across that you're a bit antisocial at work, because like sometimes, especially when I started, there's certain conversations I didn't used to get into at work, because I thought, if I get into that conversation, you start off to tell me things about yourself, it means I feel personally that I have to reciprocate by telling you something, and I may not necessarily be ready to share or even want to share at all. And I know, like, even my husband, obviously, like there's certain things I would say to our neighbors and stuff that my husband was like, that was too much information. I'm like, no, it was just a conversation. But like, and I'm just like, oh, calm down, man. But I can see where he's coming from, because it's like, that was me a few years ago. So sometimes culture and like the way, like, I think culture and how you've kind of adapted into things can also like change how you think on stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
I said a lot in there.
No, but I do think that there's value in that as well, because, you know, it's not necessarily wrong or whatever, it's just another way of doing things. It's just a difference.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am also learning that there is a level of openness that is really helpful and really not only to you but to others. So I think in the past I'd be open to, like, once I feel like I don't know, like once I feel like we're closer or whatever, it's I don't know, when you get that feeling, then it's much easier for you to be open with that person or those people. And also I think in general, I am learning to be a bit more open about like what I think and things like that in this sort of work environment and things like that. But I think at the back of my mind, all those other things will still be, you know, playing in the back of your mind. And also, to be honest, in reality, there are consequences for certain things. So you still will engage in like protectionist behaviors, like behaviors to protect yourself and to make sure that you don't put yourself at a disadvantage. I think that we do a lot of self-policing in general, in the workplace and in our careers and things, but also there's another side which is more about maybe having a different sense of what being open means in a social context, which sometimes other people from other cultures don't necessarily understand. And like you said, for me, they take it as you're being antisocial, you're being whatever, but it's just like, no, it's just I have a different I guess tolerance level to open. That's the best way I can explain it, to openness.
I think as well, I definitely see where you're coming from. And I think as well, often when we think about openness, we think as well about people feeling that it's a safe place to share information. And, you know, it might just be that whoever's sharing feels that, okay, it's safe for me to share this. If I share this, it's not the end of the world. What you might find is that people generally don't tend to share very personal things to a large crowd. Now, we do see that happening, don't get me wrong, but I think in general, and this is across cultures, I think, you find that people generally don't share those really, really personal things unless they already feel that they've established a relationship with you. And I think that tends to be a very natural progression. So you meet someone, and then over time, as you build up that trust, that's when those things start to come out a bit more. And, you know, I think, although at work I have for a long time in a working environment worn a mask, I feel like in general I am quite an open person. Well, in ways, depending on who I'm talking to, but in ways I think I'm quite a generally open person. And I definitely feel that by being open, I feel that I've been able to form quite strong relationships in ways. And not saying that if you're not open, you can't form it, but from my personal experience, I feel like I have been able to form some good relationships. And I felt that even at work, I feel that it's helped me to form relationships in the workplace, in this current workplace. It's helped me to form relationships because I've been able to be a bit more open and get to know people a bit better, which has improved my experience at work, because I feel that, you know, it's a pleasant environment a lot of the time when I go in, and I can speak to different people. So yeah, I think there are benefits to being open, definitely, as you're saying, Arabna. And I think it's about, I guess, you, like, everyone choosing their own way of being open and being upfront. And I think as well, if I'm honest, from my perspective, because I'm quite an open person, if I do come across people who feel a lot more closed, even when I've tried and I've made effort, it does make me feel a bit, I don't know, a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm not the most open person at work, but it does make you feel a little bit like, oh, okay. And it just, the actual interaction feels very one-dimensional. And I'm not saying that we have to have these type of real, like, these close relationships with everyone, because I don't think that's necessarily how things should be. But yeah, I do feel a bit more of a distance in that sense. But yeah, going back to what we were saying before, I do think that there are some benefits of being open about our experiences in life, because actually sometimes what we have experienced can be used to help other people as well, and help to encourage other people. So rather than it just being like, oh, you know, this sounds like a difficult situation that you're going through, you know, I think maybe you could try this, you can try this, you can try that. Sometimes just being open and saying, do you know what, I went through a similar situation like this. And sometimes, and you know, I you know, I do definitely hear where you're coming from in terms of how it's been difficult for you. And I remember when I went through something similar, feeling in a similar way. and it's not easy. And these are maybe some things that I've tried, but it took a process. Just being open about it and not feeling like you always have to present yourself as the finished product.
True.
Because I think as well, professionally, it's easy to think I have to present myself as this finished product, because if I don't, I'm not going to be taken seriously. They're going to think that this, they're going to think like that. And, to an extent, I don't feel that we should always share with everyone our vulnerabilities. Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do feel like by being open about it, even if we are in situations and we're with managers and we're open with our managers about how we're feeling, they can then help. Because if you're constantly walking around like things are fine, they're not getting that opportunity to help you because they think things are fine.
Of course. There's no other way they'll know that things aren't. And I think that's one of the things that probably this career has helped me to develop, just having probably like just being working in health anyway, because obviously you have to take responsibility for your progression. You have to take responsibility for your health. And all of that means that obviously like discussing with someone at work, probably when things are getting to a head a bit too much, things that probably previously I may have thought, oh, I just have to like weather the storm, or I just have to keep going with it. But actually, if I know that I have that duty, well, it's also part of my duty of care to the people I look after, isn't it? To make sure that I'm in good health, and both physically and mentally as well, to actually continue to execute my job. So as someone rightly said to me at work recently, you're no good to anyone, including yourself, when you're homesick and that sort of stuff. So it's that same thing, that actually when things are getting to a head, I'm quite honest about like my limitations, my cares, my concerns, but also like just kind of even open about things that I feel like I'm great at and I want to like try that sort of stuff. So yes, there's a range of that. I think what I gathered from what you both said is also the fact that what's considered personal is also relative.
I was about to say that.
That's also very relative.
It's really important to say.
Yeah, because like when you think about it, what someone considers personal. So for example, me getting into work maybe on a Monday morning, and I'm using me just very loosely, I'm not saying this is what I do, but getting into work on a Monday morning and saying, yeah, so the weekend, my husband did this and did that and did this and did that. For someone, that's okay, because then they're just talking about the weekend and it's not that personal because they're not saying something else. Where for someone else, that's just too much information. I don't need to know all of that. So it's just that I'm learning a whole lot more how relative almost absolutely everything in the world is. Like what's personal to you isn't that personal to someone else, and vice versa. So it's just bearing that in mind as well. But I definitely agree with what Anya said in terms of when someone's a bit like, when someone doesn't give as much information, even if it's things that you're not expecting too much, if that makes sense, but you live within this culture and like just kind of having that kind of chit chat, to and fro conversation, and when it's not being reciprocated, it can feel a bit like stilted, and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have that conversation with them, because again, you also don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. So you're like, well, maybe I'm not going to broach that conversation again if they're not very responsive. So I do get it from both perspective.
I think as well.
Oh, sorry. I think sort of leading on from that, I think that is a really key point, because what everyone considers personal is different, especially in certain cultures. So, for example, I'm sorry to bring the weekend up again, but actually for some people that is very personal and they're not going to talk about that very much. And I don't think that they should then be penalized or ostracized or seen as the strange person in the group because they're not sharing their weekend business. Like I think the bottom line with all of these things is just take people as they are. So you as the person, if you realize that culturally this is how I've grown up and whatever, and I feel this certain way, but actually I want to try and be a bit more open, that's cool. Then try and be a bit more open with what you're comfortable with, because sometimes when you are that a little bit more open, it can help and it can sort of make things a bit smoother. But at the same time, for the other people on the other side that come from a different culture, maybe the dominant culture, and talking about your weekend is not a big deal, have some understanding for that other person as well. Don't assume that they're just standoffish because it's not necessarily standoffish. I'm sure that people might not realize that some aspects of that can be due to culture, and because every culture considers, like a simple example of going into people's houses. In some cultures, before you go into someone's house, you take off your shoes. In other cultures, you can walk in the bathroom with your shoes on. So it's just you don't need to know everything, but it's just everyone being open, ironically using this, everyone being open about, differences, and then managing that. And then on both sides or all sides, just trying things out, because actually it is a lot more difficult to be on the side that is not the main culture or whatever, and being a bit more sort of interpreted as being closed, and trying to be more open. That is quite difficult to do. It takes a lot of courage for that person. So I think that's just something that I'd want to kind of highlight of, it's not wrong, it's just different, and you can learn other ways. There are benefits to you and to others if you learn to be a bit more open about certain things, but also you don't have to be as well. Basically is what I wanted to kind of highlight. I don't want it to be like just never change yourself and never grow, like, no. I just think that everyone needs to just try and understand each other a bit more and realize that there's more to everything than what you see from your view, from your culture, and just vice versa as well. It's okay to try something that's different to what you've been taught, or what you've grown up with, even though you've been, the sort of habit has been not to tell anyone anything until it's done. Maybe for a certain thing, maybe try telling somebody about something that you've done a bit earlier if you feel comfortable with it. And sometimes that will lead to a lot more than if you presented yourself as this finished product, like we've been saying.
I think to summarize, really, I definitely do agree that you can, in terms of openness, I think it's important to be open at a level that you feel comfortable with. I think it's important not to feel pressured to be open, and not to feel that you need to be open just to please other people. Personally, as I've said already today, I think that there are some real benefits to being open about certain issues. And by this, I say it to say there's good things, but I'm not the most open person at the same time. I'm not the type of person who will just come to work and, talk about my whole life like that. I do keep a lot of things to myself. Even in my personal life, I keep things to myself. But at the same time, I can see the benefit of just being open a little bit, just letting someone else in the door. And I think particularly when we talk about mental health as well, when things are difficult, I think it's important to be open and honest about some of those difficult times with people who you feel comfortable and you feel that it's a safe place to be open and honest with these things too. So I think it's definitely important in the arena of mental health. I think when we think about just in terms of forming relationships with people, I do see the benefit of being open about certain things in order to build that foundation of a relationship and of a friendship. So yeah, I definitely can see some benefits of being open, but I think it's important not to feel pressurized into doing anything that you don't feel comfortable with doing.
On today's episode, we talked about openness, especially lessons we learned in that regards from the first season, and what that means to us. Well as talked about openness in the workplace, in the light of being professionals, and just in consideration of different cultural norms, and especially in light of this society that we live in. We really hope you enjoy the conversation, and please, as always, please share your thoughts with us on our social media platforms, and you can also contact us via email. Until next time.